The golden chandeliers of Mar-a-Lago shimmered over a long oak dining table where the Trump family gathered for what was supposed to be an evening of celebration. Donald Trump, now serving his second term as President of the United States, had spent months preparing for this moment. The press had been subtly notified, the business elite were anticipating the news, and every major publication was ready to run the headline, Barron Trump, the next in line to the Trump empire. At 18, Barron had the world at his feet. He was the son of one of the most powerful men in modern American history. The Trump Organization, worth billions, was ready to be handed to him as a legacy. The political power, the real estate empire, the influence over media and business, it was all set up for him. But as his father stood up to give his speech, Barron's heart pounded in his chest. He had rehearsed this moment in his mind over and over again, yet the words felt heavy on his tongue. Donald Trump raised his glass and addressed the family and close associates. Today, we celebrate my youngest son, Barron Trump, the future of the Trump dynasty, a man who will take the empire even further than I did. The room erupted in applause. Melania Trump, sitting beside Barron, placed her hand on his gently as if she could sense the storm brewing within him. Barron stood up, clearing his throat. "Thank you, Dad," he began, his voice steady but strained. "I know this is a big moment for our family, for everyone here." Donald Trump nodded approvingly. "That's right, son. And you're ready to carry on the name, aren't you?" Silence filled the room as Barron took a deep breath. "No, Dad," he said, his voice firmer this time. "I'm not taking over the Trump empire." A stunned hush fell over the gathering. The air became thick with disbelief. Donald Trump's expression froze, his lips parting slightly in shock. "What? I've decided to walk my own path," Barron continued, his hands tightening into fists at his sides. "I don't want to be a part of the Trump Organization, the political world, or any of this." Gasps echoed around the room. Eric Trump's drink nearly slipped from his hand. Ivanka exchanged a wide-eyed glance with Jared. Donald Jr. shook his head in disbelief. Donald Trump leaned forward, his voice dropping to an authoritative whisper. "Barron, you don't know what you're saying." "I do," Barron insisted. "I've thought about this for years. I want to be my own person, not just Donald Trump's son. I don't want to be trapped in this world of politics and business deals. I want to live life on my own terms." Melania placed a hand on his arm, her face unreadable. "Barron, are you sure?" He nodded. "Yes. 100%. The former First Lady sighed, closing her eyes briefly. She had always known this day would come, but even she hadn't expected Barron to take such a public stand. Donald Trump, however, was not one to let things go easily. His face darkened as he rose from his seat, his booming voice shaking the room. "Do you realize what you're doing?" he demanded. "You're throwing away everything I built. The Trump name means something. It's a brand, an empire. And you're saying you want nothing to do with it." Barron took a deep breath. "That's exactly what I'm saying." For the first time in his life, he felt free. But freedom had a price. And as he looked at his father's face, filled with both shock and fury, he realized he had just declared war against the most powerful family in America. The silence in the Mar-a-Lago dining hall felt heavier than the crystal chandeliers above. Barron's words hung in the air like a storm cloud. He could feel the weight of a dozen stares drilling into him, some confused, others furious. Donald Trump's face remained stoic for a moment before he broke the silence. "You're making the biggest mistake of your life, Barron," he said, his voice dangerously low. Barron didn't flinch. "Maybe, but at least it will be my life." Ivanka was the first to react, her polished demeanor cracking slightly. "Barron, you don't understand," she said, forcing a smile to soften the tension. "Do you know how many people dream of this opportunity? The Trump legacy, it's not just about business. It's about power, influence." Barron shook his head. "I don't want any of it. I never did." Donald Jr. let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, so what? You're too good for the empire Dad built from scratch? You think walking away makes you better than the rest of us?" "It's not about being better," Barron shot back. "It's about being me. I want a life that's real, not one scripted for headlines and corporate deals." Melania, still seated, shifted uneasily. Her voice was softer but no less concerned. "You're only 18, Barron. Maybe you need time to think." "I've had time, Mom," Barron said quietly. "And this is what I want." Donald slammed his glass down on the table. "So what do you plan to do? Become some nobody? Live in some apartment and get a normal job? Is that what you want?" Barron met his father's fiery gaze with an unexpected calmness. "I don't need billions of dollars or skyscrapers with my name on them to be someone. I want to make a difference, but in my own way." The room was so quiet that the distant sound of waves crashing outside the estate echoed faintly. For a moment, no one knew what to say. Finally, Donald leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. You walk away from this, you walk away from everything. You understand that? I understand, Barron replied, the tremor in his voice betraying how much this moment hurt. The man who had negotiated deals with world leaders and turned his last name into an empire now found himself facing a challenge he never anticipated, his own son rejecting everything he stood for. Melania rose to her feet and reached for Barron's hand. If this is truly what you want, I support you, she said softly. Donald's face hardened. That's a mistake, Melania. No, she said, her eyes flashing. It's his choice. And whether you like it or not, Donald, he's not you. For the first time that evening, Barron felt his mother standing firmly in his corner. But he also knew what it meant to cross his father. There were no second chances in the Trump world. As the room remained frozen in tension, Barron turned and walked toward the grand marble staircase. With each step, the weight of his decision settled deeper into his chest. The life everyone assumed he wanted, the luxury, the power, the inheritance was now behind him. Upstairs, he closed the heavy door to his suite and leaned against it, exhaling shakily. For years, he had played the role of the quiet Trump, always in the background while the world obsessed over his father and older siblings. But he had never belonged to that world, not really. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from his best friend, Nate. Dude, did you really just reject the whole Trump empire? Barron smiled faintly. Yeah, I did. Nate's reply came quickly. Legend. So, what's next? That was the question, wasn't it? What came next? Downstairs, the fallout was only beginning. The morning sun cast a golden hue over the sprawling Mar-a-Lago estate, but inside Barron Trump's bedroom, everything felt heavy. He stared at his reflection in the mirror, blonde hair slightly disheveled, dark circles under his eyes from a sleepless night. His father's words echoed in his mind. You walk away from this, you walk away from everything. A knock at the door broke the silence. It was Melania. Can I come in, Barron? Her voice was gentle, but there was an edge of worry. He opened the door and stepped aside. She walked in, dressed in an elegant cream suit, her face softer than it had been the night before. You don't have to do this, she said quietly, sitting on the edge of his bed. Your father, he doesn't understand yet. But he loves you. I know, Barron admitted, sitting beside her. But I can't live my life chasing his dreams. I want to figure out who I am without the Trump name hanging over me. Melania studied her son for a long moment before sighing softly. You've always been different from the others, she said, brushing a stray lock of hair from his face. Quieter. More thoughtful. But this path you're choosing, it won't be easy. I'm not looking for easy, Mom. I'm looking for real. She stood up, smoothing the front of her suit. Whatever happens, I will always be on your side, she said, her accent thickening with emotion. But your father, you know he won't let this go. I'm ready for that, Barron said, though his heart pounded with uncertainty. He knew the world wouldn't let him fade into obscurity easily, not when his last name was Trump. By noon, the media storm had already begun. News outlets plastered headlines across every major platform. Barron Trump rejects the family empire, a stunning rebellion. Is the Trump dynasty crumbling? The heir who walked away. What's next for Barron Trump? Twitter exploded with opinions ranging from praise to mockery. Some celebrated his independence. Finally, a Trump with a mind of his own. Others weren't so kind. Another spoiled rich kid turning his back on family. Typical. Inside the Trump Organization's Manhattan headquarters, the backlash hit like an earthquake. Donald Trump paced his office, phone in hand, firing off furious messages to key advisors. Damage control now, he barked at his press secretary. Ivanka, usually the composed one, wasn't hiding her frustration. Dad, this is bad, she said, scrolling through the flood of negative headlines. Investors don't like uncertainty. If they think there's a succession problem. There isn't a problem, Trump snapped. He'll come around. He's a kid. He doesn't understand what he's throwing away. But deep down, a seed of doubt gnawed at him. Barron wasn't like his other children, he never craved the spotlight. And unlike his older siblings, he didn't flinch in the face of his father's disapproval. 1,000 miles away, Barron had slipped out of the public eye. Dressed in jeans and a hoodie, he boarded a commercial flight, no private jets this time, to Los Angeles. For the first time in his life, he wasn't surrounded by security or the weight of his last name. He was just a kid with a backpack and a dream. His destination, a tiny non-profit organization focused on digital rights and online privacy. Months ago, while still trapped in the Trump world, Barron had secretly reached out to them. Their mission to fight corporate overreach and protect individual freedoms had struck a chord with him, a stark contrast to the empire his father had built. When he arrived at the modest office space in downtown LA, a young woman with short purple hair greeted him at the door. "Barron Trump," she said, raising an eyebrow. "Didn't think you were serious?" "I'm serious," Barron replied. "I want to help." Her skepticism faded into a smile. "All right then, rich kid. Let's see what you've got." For the first time in his life, Barron Trump felt like he was exactly where he belonged. The hum of old computers filled the cramped office space in downtown Los Angeles. It wasn't the gilded luxury of Trump Tower, but to Barron it felt like freedom. The air was thick with the smell of coffee and ambition. People worked on worn-out laptops, fighting against the tech giant's grip on personal privacy, a fight Barron never knew he cared about until now. Sasha, the purple-haired woman who had greeted him, handed him a pile of papers. "You wanted in, so here's your first task," she said, smirking. "We're tracking corporate data breaches. Think you can handle it, Trump Jr.?" "Just Barron," he corrected, sliding into an empty chair. "And yeah, I can handle it." For weeks, he worked in silence, learning the ins and outs of the digital rights movement. No one cared about his last name here. In fact, most of his co-workers distrusted big corporations, especially ones like the Trump Organization. At first, many thought he was a spy. But soon, his dedication earned their respect. Still, the shadow of his old life followed him. News cameras regularly staked out the building. Social media boiled with rumors. Some headlines claimed Barron's rejection of the Trump empire was just a stunt for attention. Others speculated there was a deeper rift between father and son than anyone imagined. Inside the White House, Donald Trump's patience was running thin. "We've let this go on long enough," he growled, tossing a newspaper onto the Oval Office desk. The headline read, "Barron Trump, America's most famous runaway." Ivanka leaned against the window, her arms folded. "He's embarrassing us," she said coolly. "Our brand, our entire image is built on strength and loyalty. What message does this send if our own blood turns his back on us?" Donald Jr., ever the loyal soldier, shook his head. "He's just a kid. We should have never trusted him to carry the name." But Melania, sitting quietly in the corner, finally spoke. "He's not a brand," she said softly, her accent thicker with emotion. "He's our son." Her words hung heavy in the air, but Donald wasn't swayed. "If he wants to act like he's not a Trump, fine. But I won't let him drag our name through the mud." Meanwhile, Barron tried to move forward. For the first time, he felt a sense of purpose. Late nights were spent coding, tracking corporate misuse of personal data, and advocating for stronger privacy laws. He no longer cared about the power struggles happening back in New York. But as much as he tried to distance himself, the world wouldn't let him. One night, as he walked back to his small apartment, his phone buzzed an unknown number. Against his better judgment, he answered. "I hope you're enjoying your little rebellion," came his father's unmistakable voice. Barron froze. It had been months since they'd spoken directly. "I'm not rebelling," he said evenly. "I'm living my own life." "You think anyone cares about your life without the Trump name?" Donald spat. "You'll never escape it. You're my son, whether you like it or not. And one day you'll realize everything I built was for you." Barron's jaw tightened. "I never asked for any of it." A heavy silence fell between them. "You're making a mistake," Donald warned. "And when you fail, don't expect me to pick up the pieces." Barron swallowed the lump rising in his throat. "I didn't call for your help then, and I won't need it now." Without another word, he hung up, his heart pounding. The conversation left a bitter taste in his mouth. But instead of breaking him, it fueled his resolve. If his father believed he was nothing without the Trump name, he would prove otherwise. Within weeks, Barron threw himself deeper into his work. He spearheaded a project uncovering one of the largest data privacy breaches in American history. When the findings went public, it wasn't Donald Trump's son making headlines, it was Barron, the activist. His name became a symbol for a new generation fighting against corporate greed and political overreach. But in doing so, he was no longer just rejecting the Trump legacy, he was threatening it. And his father would not stand by and let that happen. The storm that Barron Trump had unleashed was no longer just tabloid gossip. His work exposing corporate data breaches sent shockwaves through the tech and business worlds, some of which intersected directly with the Trump Organization's financial interests. It was no longer just a personal rebellion. It was a public threat. Barron knew the call was coming before it happened. He had seen the headlines. Trump empire under scrutiny after Barron's latest bombshell. Father versus son, the battle that could tear the Trump legacy apart. When his phone rang one evening and the caller ID flashed private number, he let it ring twice before answering. "I hope you're proud of yourself," his father's voice rumbled through the speaker. It was cold, calculated, the voice of a man who had built a billion-dollar empire brick by brick. I'm proud of the work I'm doing, Barron replied, his tone steady. You're not just hurting me, you're hurting the family, Donald snapped. Your mother, your siblings. Do you even care? I care, Barron said quietly. But for once, I care about doing the right thing more. There was a pause, one that stretched long enough for Barron to imagine his father pacing, calculating his next move. I gave you everything, Donald finally said. And this is how you repay me. You're turning on your own blood. I didn't ask for everything, Barron shot back, his voice rising. I wanted a father, not a brand manager. I'm not going to be your puppet, Dad. The line went deadly silent. You're making a mistake, Donald said again, but this time his voice was low, almost a growl. And I don't forgive mistakes. I'm not afraid of you, Barron said, surprising even himself. The call disconnected with a cold click. The weeks following the call were a test of endurance. The Trump Organization's legal team began quietly investigating the nonprofit Barron worked for. Rumors swirled that his father was using his political connections to shut down their operations. Despite the pressure, Barron refused to back down. If anything, the fight only strengthened his conviction. Still, the weight of estrangement wore on him. His mother's calls grew less frequent. His siblings publicly distanced themselves. His last name, once a golden ticket, was now a scarlet letter in certain circles. And yet, in the quiet moments, Barron felt something unfamiliar: freedom. One night, after another grueling day at the office, Sasha found him sitting alone, staring out over the twinkling city skyline. You okay, Barron? She asked softly. He sighed. I don't know anymore. You did something no one else in your family has ever done, she said, sitting beside him. You chose yourself. That takes guts. He paused, struggling to find the words. I wanted to be more than just another Trump. You already are, she said, nudging his shoulder. And maybe that's exactly what scares him. The final break came unexpectedly. A leaked memo from inside the Trump Organization revealed a plan to discredit Barron and his work. It outlined a strategy to paint him as a naive, spoiled rich kid playing activist for attention. When the memo hit the media, it was a PR disaster, not for Barron, but for the Trump empire. Public opinion shifted. For the first time, the Trump name was seen as out of touch, a relic of an era where power meant everything and principles meant nothing. Instead of crushing Barron, the smear attempt made him a symbol of independence and integrity. And with that, the last thread connecting him to his father's world snapped. Months later, Barron stood on a stage in San Francisco addressing a crowd of thousands at a digital freedom conference. I grew up in a world where power meant controlling the narrative, he said, his voice ringing clear. But true power, real power, comes from standing for something greater than yourself. The crowd erupted in applause. In the front row, Melania Trump sat quietly, tears in her eyes. Despite the chaos and the public battles, she had come to support her son. And though Donald Trump was absent, Barron no longer needed his approval. He had built something his father never could, an identity that wasn't tied to a name, a fortune, or a legacy. For the first time in his life, Barron Trump was free. And nothing, not even the Trump empire, could take that away from him.